Right around the corner is the Big Ten Media Days in Indianapolis, where Evan Bland and the entire Omaha World Herald crew will be. But Evan first, before he starts walking to Indy, stops here for his weekly visit. Good morning. How are you?
Man, that travel budget.
Morning, guys. Doing all right. How are you?
Good. Got to go on foot now.
Hey, let's. Hey, you gotta have Sam open up the wallet there at the World Herald. Let's start with baseball because Tyson Lewis drafted yesterday, 51st overall by Cincinnati, the Millard West product, who had a great year. So him and his dad are both drafted. So that's kind of a nice little side note. There are other local high school products that could be drafted, but Josh Caron is probably the most one that people are going to watch. And I don't know if it matters because, as you wrote the other day, Evan, his plan is not to come back. Where do you think Nebraska's catcher, Josh Caron, will go in the draft, today or tomorrow?
I think he'll go today. I think he'll, I don't know, maybe the 4th or the 5th round, somewhere in that range, probably midday today. And, he went to the pro combine in Phoenix last month, and a lot of the folks down there said that, they loved the power. They loved how he kind of took over as a team leader and leading the staff this year. And so, I think there's just a lot there that talent evaluators like. He was a steady riser at Nebraska all the way to this year. He should have been all Big Ten. He was the biggest all Big Ten snub in Nebraska history, maybe, with what he did this year. I think, 4th, 5th round, which would make him the 2nd highest drafted Nebraska catcher ever, which is kind of a cool little footnote. I think he's fully intending to move on unless something crazy happens. And Nebraska's anticipating that he moves on. If you look at the moves they made with Hogan Haligso out of Creighton and some of the other junior college ads they made. So it seems like it's kind of a formality and just a matter of where and how much at this point. But I would imagine it would happen fairly early today.
And we were just talking about this in the 7:00 hour. Max Butenbach is going to be a Northwoods League All-Star. We know the position that he plays. Josh Caron, if he gets drafted, Gary mentions Hogan Haligso coming over from Creighton, and we know the steady rise of him. I think about this now over the last month. If you're Will Bolt and you are starting to recruit for future classes or even trying to finalize some additional roster spots right now, I don't know if I can remember here in the last 5 to 10 years a better offseason momentum-wise for this baseball program where we continue to see, whether it's Spencer Schwellenbach versus Matt Waldron, whether we see Spencer versus Cade Povich. We've seen the major league chatter. We've seen guys doing you still got 2 representatives in the Cape League as well. And you've got people looking at Nebraska as a transfer destination from a rival like Creighton. I don't know. Maybe I'm going too far with this, but then you also get a guy that could go on the second day, and Josh Caron. Just been very positive for this baseball program here this last month.
It has. A lot of good stuff. And I think you could add to that the fact that they've done really well in retaining the roster that they had. I mean, they've had 4 or 5 guys depart, but they've been either young guys or guys who maybe weren't projected to have a major role on the team next year. So you bring back the core of what you figured that you could bring back. And I guess we'll find out here in the next few days a couple of those other pieces. How do scouts view Gabe Swanson? What does Gabe Swanson want to do after the finish that he had? So, if I had to say today, my hunch would be that he would be back. I think he kind of felt like he left some performance on the table there, and I don't know that scouts necessarily saw what he did as happening over a big enough sample size for what they're looking for. So, that's one that's kind of interesting to watch. Drew Christo is one that's sort of fascinating to watch too, because he's been popping up on some of these top 500 prospect lists, and he's a junior with some leverage who could potentially maybe look at that next step. But really, like, they're not going to lose a lot, relatively speaking, to the draft. They retained what they had. Like you mentioned, you can look at the major leagues right now, and it's about as busy of a Husker place as it's ever been in recent memory, certainly. I mean, you're seeing guys out there every day, every few days that are keeping Nebraska front of mind. And then, I think too, you add just even the little schedule nugget that they had about Nebraska going to the Frisco Classic, and they're going to play
Good call.
LSU next year, and Kansas State and Sam Houston, and like that's a cool showcase event for recruits too. So yeah, I think there's a lot of positives, a lot of momentum. Rob Childress is still there as your pitching coach. There's just a lot going on, I think, with the program right now that gives them, hope that, maybe they can string NCAA tournament appearances together and really start producing pro talent at a consistent level that they haven't done in quite a while.
Hey, before we jump into a couple little football discussion, back to Drew Christo. I didn't think, watching him come out of Elkhorn High, I didn't think we'd be sitting here on his draft eligible year going, you know what? He might be back for his fourth year.
Mm-hmm.
So it took him a while to get to the point that he did this year, where from May 1 on, he was pretty good. That was the Drew Christo that we kind of expected. So let's say he doesn't get drafted and he comes back for his final year. What do you think what do you think his usage will be like, or his role will be like on next year's team?
I think there's a good chance that he would be a starter. I mean, he was a starter at times down the stretch and was really effective in that role. And you're going to have to replace Brett Sears and kind of figure out, really, you're going to have Mason McConaughey, and you're going to have to kind of figure out what the rest of that rotation can look like. But you hear him talk about the effect that Rob Childress had on him, just in his mechanics and how he went about pitching. Like, that to me is interesting piece. Like, what's another year of that look like with those guys working together and teaming up? Christo already had the stuff. He already has the makeup in terms of the personality and how he prepares and who he is and all that. A lot of it's just been a matter of consistency in the zone, consistency with the kind of pitches that he wants to throw. I know he's kind of tinkered around with some different offerings in the last year that have been effective for him. So I think Nebraska would love it if he were a rotation guy next year and was able to, give him 5 or 6 consistently and be that senior leader. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, look at Brett Sears, for crying out loud. I mean, he as a junior, he was probably done just based on what he did at Nebraska, sort of a so-so middle reliever. And then he breaks out. Like, that could be Drew Christo. Like, that's all you have to do is look at your teammate and kind of what he did. So I think that'd be the ideal. And if that doesn't work out, and Christo's a guy who gives you 2 innings in middle relief or sort of a 7th and 8th inning sort of guy, like, teams need that too. So I think there are a lot of ways that he could help. But yeah, ideally, when you look at the context of Nebraska and what it's going to need, I think a starter would probably be the preference.
Evan, this time next week when we talk, we'll be getting into Big Ten Media Day storylines, and I know there'll be a lot of the Nebraska angle that you guys will do a great job of getting out to the audience. But I saw Sam write about this too, and I'm curious about your thoughts when it comes to a lot of the main headlines in Big Ten Media Days, but when Nebraska hits the podium, when their student athletes speak, what that overall theme will be. And I thought Sam talked about a lot of that sense of urgency. There's this being that year that people are really going to have a chance to see what Matt Rhule and this roster is about. Is that the place you think Nebraska should be very comfortable in? Is not maybe having a lot of those major expectations, but just knowing that a 1-2 jump should not only be an acceptable conversation, but should somewhat be expected. I know it's weird sometimes putting expectations in front of this football program, but are we now at that point with this football team after just 1 year of Matt Rhule that it's okay to put some of those expectations in front of them?
Yeah, I think they'll probably touch on that a little bit, but to me, maybe the message would be more, okay, you guys have expectations for us. Here's why you should have expectations for us. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I think that would give them the platform to sort of spread the good news about Nebraska, like they've done a really good job of this offseason. So I think they'll talk about their staff size and about their nutrition program and about their new weight room and about, Dylan Raiola and about their coaching staff. Like, that to me is probably the message that I would lead with is, okay, again, we're high on the national list of potential breakouts. Matt Rhule's reputation at Temple and Baylor is what it is. And now, wow, here's all that combined with the resources that Nebraska has. And so, I mean, that's just, to me, that's kind of felt like the theme of the offseason. You think about Matt Rhule rolling out more than a dozen off the field staffers and personnel to like just get the word out about what they do and what Nebraska can offer. And you see the social media videos that are put out there and the work that they do to put in, that they put into those. To me, this is an extension of that. And then you think about the guys who are representing Nebraska there. I mean, Ty Robinson's going to be able to talk about why he came back for a sixth season. And then Ben Scott's going to be able to talk about why he transferred to Nebraska. And Isaac Gifford's going to say what this program means to people locally and how much maybe it's changed in his time there. So like that, I feel like that's kind of the message, and you have the players in place to sort of bear that out or put individual stories to it. And then I think the other piece I would add too is like, relatively speaking, this has been a quieter off season for Nebraska, and it feels like the first time in a couple of years where the focus is actually on the football. You know, we're going to be talking about the schedules, and we're going to be talking about the defensive consistency and about why the offense can be better, right? We're not maybe caught up in Ireland prep or first year new coach or whatever. Like it just kind of feels like the main thing is sort of the main thing this year. And I think that fits right into Nebraska's wheelhouse and what it wants to be about.
If Nebraska, let's play a little fill in the blank here. Well, no, let's don't play fill in the blank. This is a question that I've thought about a lot. Do wins this season equal success? Like if it's 7, is that a successful season? If it's 8, that's a successful season. Do wins equal success in year 2? Yes,
because if you don't win in year 2, given this schedule, that's probably an issue, right? Like this is a huge opportunity with the start that they have, the on-ramp to the season, the home games, who they miss in Big 12 scheduling. Like you got to win the games that are in front of you. And like, this is a big opportunity to not just get off the schneid, but to build momentum for recruiting, to instill belief in a fan base that this can happen, for Matt Rhule to kind of keep with his, career trend of turning programs around in their second year. I think it's an interesting conversation too, Gary, because you do have those situations where maybe there are years where teams get better, but the schedule isn't maybe easy enough, and it doesn't get reflected in the win-loss record. I think this is a schedule that could maybe accentuate it a little more. Like if Nebraska wins 7 or 8 games, maybe they're actually not that much better, but the schedule helps make it look that way a little bit. So yeah, I think absolutely. If you fall short this year with the strength that you have on both lines, the experience you have in the trenches, with the schedule, the way that it lines up, with the guy that you have at defensive coordinator and all the rest, like I think it'd be a huge disappointment to not at least make a bowl game, play meaningful football into November. So yeah, I think that is the case. And really it's all a matter of perspective, right? Like you can look at this thing as a major opportunity, or you can look at this thing with some pressure too and say, man, you don't want to swing and miss at this thing because you're not going to get a better chance than what's coming up this season.
Okay, and I like the question that Gary asked, because I think it's people are going to say as simple as getting the wins, but I want to take this to just another part of, without divisions, we always look at Nebraska, and if they're in a position to beat the teams, or what we might chalk up as 50-50 games now, but these were games 5-6 years ago that we would say are wins. If you look at the Illinois of the world, if you look at the Purdue's of the world, if you look at the Northwesterns, and again, a lot of these teams in Nebraska's old division, is this an opportunity given largely in the first 7 games, but you do have a UCLA a little bit later on as well, that this is where you establish, I don't want to say forever, but this is a good opportunity where you're going to establish yourself in that Big Ten pecking order of the type of tier team you can be when it comes to the wins and against who that you have success against?
Yeah, because I think the format change that you lay out when you have no divisions, you're going to just a list of 18 teams. Like it's a chance to kind of reset perspective in a year when the format change is there. So like, you know, if you were in the old Big Ten West and you finish second or third, okay. I mean, that would be an improvement, but it wouldn't, I don't think, have the same impact as what could happen this year, where it's, you know, say Nebraska finishes, you know, sixth in the league. Like, it's a fresh look, or fresh maybe way to evaluate how the team's doing. And so if Nebraska indeed does take a jump this year, and it happens in that new format, I think that it leaves just maybe a more of a lasting impact, or more of a lasting impression on fans, on national media types. And like, that's going to be the new gauge. Like, again, you're not talking about finishing in the top half on one side, so you get 60 minutes to try to beat the East juggernaut. Like, it's all about, you know, CFP conversation. Are you in range for that? If you're not, you're talking about bowl games. You're talking about being in the upper half of the conference. So to me, that's kind of the opportunity that Nebraska has. And then you add in the 4 newcomers from the West Coast as well. And, you know, where do they fit in? Where does Nebraska fit in relative to them? Like, this is a chance to set the standard in a way it's a really rare opportunity, just given all the change that's going on. So that's kind of what I'd say. It kind of feels like maybe there's a little bit more value to a good year in that regard. But again, the flip side of the coin is true too. If you finish 12th or 13th or something like that, and you stumble, it's going to be kind of hard to, I think, shake off that initial impression as well as you move forward.
Hey, great stuff, Evan. We always appreciate the conversation. We got one more week. Next week, we're into talking season, then the season starts. Hope you enjoyed your off season.
It was great. It blinked and it was gone.
Enthusiastic there too.
Hey, thank you, Evan. Appreciate it.
See you guys.